Okay, I'm back for part 2 of the 50 bookish questions. Again, I saw this originally through World of Tomes on YouTube, and then I went to lukeharkness.com and his blog and got them in writing so that I could read along and answer them. So I'm going to pick up with 26, and I'll tell you more about my reading habits. So 26, you like to write reviews on Amazon or Goodreads. I do not. I don't want to write reviews on anything. And I kind of said this in the last part of this is, one, I don't want to judge anybody's reading. There are books that I love that other people hate. There are books that people love that I hate, or I don't want to say hate. I mean, hate's a strong word, but that I haven't enjoyed. And, I sometimes feel like reviews, and it's weird. I'm a writer, so I know how important reviews are. I do get it. But at the same time, I just think reading can be so subjective and it's so personal. And one of the things I don't like either is the star rating system. So I've kind of changed my perspective on Goodreads is, I would rate things for myself, just to kind of remind myself what I thought of the book. I wouldn't write a review, but I would just kind of rank it. And, but I think it's kind of gotten to the point where 3 stars is seen as a bad thing. And, for me, that was always just oh, I liked it. I may not go back and pick it back up again. It might not be, on my must read recommended list, but it's not a bad book. And I definitely enjoyed it. And 4 to me was I loved it. It just wasn't one of my favorite books of all time. And even a 2 to me was it's okay. It's not for me, but I think it's a good book. But I just think that there's so much emotional connection to, reading for people. And I don't want reading to become sort of divisive or just, I don't know the word, but I guess just negative or I don't know, conflict. I don't want there to be conflict. I know there's a better word for that. But, so I don't want to write reviews. I don't think that, so now on Goodreads, the only books I'll rate is the ones I feel comfortable giving a 5-star review. And there are ones that are really for me, a 4.5, but if I can't solidly be yeah, I can give this 5 stars, I just am not going to rate it. I'll just mark it as read. And then, I'm happy to have a conversation with somebody about it, but I just I don't want to be, making someone either feel bad or making an author feel bad. I mean, it's just, when I don't even mean to, because again, a 3 or 4 isn't bad, but I know that how that reads to, to the writer or to somebody who's really passionate about that book. 27. In general, do you think books are better or worse now than they used to be? I mean, that's just so subjective. I think in some ways they're better just because there's more exposure, between ebooks and, self-publishing and the option, and I think there's more focus, obviously, in the publishing industry on trying to, diversify the writer pool and, what's out there. So in that way, they're better. I mean, I don't know that, I just know that there had to have been, women and people of color who were writing, obviously back in the world of the classics that weren't getting any opportunities. I mean, we know Mary Shelley had to publish under her husband's name for Frankenstein to get published. And, obviously the Brontes used male pen names. And so I think in that way it's better. But at the same time, it's not the classics are bad. There's a reason they're classics, we still read them because they're good. But again, I do think there's probably books that never got read or never, got the right exposure. And I think because of things like YouTube and podcasts and blogs and, TikTok and all of social media, it kind of gives us more exposure and more opportunities to get more books in front of people, which obviously means there's more books spread out. But, I do think at the same time that makes it, so everybody can find something. 28, where do you usually discover new books? Bookstores, online, social media? Really, it's kind of anywhere. Usually, obviously, friends are the number one. If somebody's like, hey, I like this book, you should read this. That's one. And then obviously some social media, listening to some YouTube videos. Sometimes, Goodreads or Amazon will be like, hey, you like all these, maybe you'll like this. Sometimes from the library, they'll just be like, these are the most popular of this type of book, or these are the most popular reads of this month. So I'll sometimes look at that. And then obviously when you're in a bookstore or in a library, sometimes you're just playing around, and that's where you're definitely judging a book by its cover. I'll sometimes flip through too and just read a random page and see if I like the way it's written. But it's hard to really tell on a random page. So, like I said though, I'll pretty much read anything. So I'm very easy to convince to read something. So if somebody's like, hey, read this, I'm like, okay. 29. Have you ever joined a book club? I have. But what I discovered is that no one actually was reading the books in the book club. I was for a little bit, and then I was the one who read the book, and I showed up at book club and had read the book, and everybody in the book club had not read the book. And I feel like we just kind of were everyone was just drinking wine and talking about their lives, and I was like, oh, I thought we were going to talk about this book. So, I'm not sure that that's everybody's book club experience. But yeah, that was mine. And I don't know. I'm not a very social person, so I don't know how good I would do in a book club. Maybe I think I might do better on an online book club, where I could be with people that I'd kind of formed any sort of sense that I would we'd have similar taste, or we'd have at least have if not similar taste, at least be able to converse in the same way about the books. Because I think sometimes your book club is just here's some people that work together, and you're all coming from different perspectives. And I have a tendency, like I said, I don't like romance, and I'm a woman in my 40s, and so for me, I find it's challenging because a lot of people my age, especially a lot of women my age, a lot of the books they like are about women our age, and their kids growing up and being empty nesters eventually, or their kids being teenagers. And I don't have kids, and I don't really care about all those mom books. And I struggle because sometimes I'm I don't relate to this, and I feel weird, and I can't really have a conversation about this. And my husband and I get along, so I don't have a lot of things to talk about. A lot of the books deal with divorce and stuff, and I just don't have much to say. And so sometimes I feel I'm kind of alienated from my my place. So I don't know, I need to find people like-minded, but it's hard. And it gets harder as you get older. Number 30, where do you like to read? At home, on the couch, on the train, in bed? In bed, at home. I generally like to be home. So yeah, I'll read anywhere. I'll read on the train, I'll read at the doctor's office, I'll read wherever there's a book and a chance to read. But yeah, my favorite is obviously just curling up in bed or in a comfortable chair and reading. 31, what deceased author would you have liked to meet? Like I said, I'm really awkward, and I said this in the last one, and I don't know, I would have probably messed up. I'd kind of like to meet Hemingway. I feel like he was so blunt that it might be good for me, because I wouldn't have to try. He'd just say it like it was, and I wouldn't have to constantly be am I being weird? And, he'd just be hey, you're being weird. I feel like he's, kind of brutal, and I like that. Also maybe Shakespeare, and then I could prove that he was a real person, or if he wasn't, I could figure out who it was. 32, thinking about your favorite genre. To you, which author is the master of that genre? Again, I don't really read a lot of set genres. I'll read anything. I think mystery, obviously Agatha Christie, kind of was the foundation of mysteries. There's a little bit of Poe. For horror, Stephen King is obviously the master. There are definitely people who are great, but I think everybody would basically go to those people, for Right now, I think I love, like I said, I like Ruth Ware a lot in the mystery genre. And then in horror, I actually really like Riley Sager. But, again, like I think everybody will kind of say is like, okay, it's Agatha Christie and Stephen King. Fantasy, I mean, there's obviously Tolkien. I don't read a ton of fantasy. I like George R. R. Martin, but I like A Song of Ice and Fire because it's kind of historical fiction fantasy. So it feels very real. And it's really, I kind of joke when I watch Succession that Succession is basically Game of Thrones in a boardroom. And that's what I like about the whole like Song of Ice and Fire is it's way more about like the politics and just the people and the scheming than it is about like the sort of fantasy world. I know there's dragons, but that's like kind of secondary. So that's what I really enjoy. And I know there's other fantasy writers that do that. And I'd be curious like who they are because I might like those. But I struggle sometimes with fantasy because I just feel like I'm spending so much time just trying to figure out who all these people are, and they all have weird names and, all these places, and I have to keep looking at the map and trying to figure out where I am and what's happening. And for some reason, I never found that. And maybe it's because I read Song of Ice and Fire while I'd already seen, parts of the show. So, I mean, that helped. So that might be part of it too. 33, do you judge a book by its cover? No, generally not. I mean, I think like in a good way. Sometimes like a book will catch me because I'll have a really cool cover. But like would a shoddy cover put you off? I mean, not necessarily. I mean, if somebody said, hey, this book is great, even if the cover was awful, I'm going to trust somebody's opinion, that if it's somebody I know or somebody that I've liked other recommendations by them. But I do think, I'm not going to necessarily lean towards that cover if that's what I was seeing in the bookstore. So, I mean, I guess in some way we all do it, but, I think like everyone has their preferences though. So like what makes a good cover is going to be very different for everyone. So yeah, I mean, to some degree, but, 34, do certain tropes attract you? I don't know. I mean, I like the hero's journey. I mean, I guess it's a trope at this point, the chosen one and like, going past, going over the threshold and, getting the mentor and, that whole Star Wars and Harry Potter and, that hero's journey archetype kind of, and I don't know if it's a trope or more of an archetype. I like that, but it has to be well done. I mean, obviously, I love Harry Potter, so that's fine. I wouldn't say I'm attracted to it. I mean, again, A Song of Ice and Fire has it, Star Wars has it, Harry Potter has it, but those are all really great stories. So it's kind of hard to say. Like, I don't like the trope. I just kind of like those stories. Love triangles. I mean, I don't like romance, and so like love triangles annoy me. But I've seen stories where they're well done, and they're fine. I I don't feel like I need it. And sometimes I find it frustrating because I feel like, especially in young adult, it always seems like, like for instance, The Hunger Games, we didn't need a love triangle in that book. Like it's barely even there. And it's just kind of like, have a love triangle. That's a thing. So I don't know that we need it a lot. And so sometimes it kind of irritates me, but I don't really have like a trope that I'm attracted to or that turns me off. 35, are there any books you haven't been able to finish and why not? So I am not one who can DNF a book. Like that doesn't mean I haven't, but usually it's because like something happens in my life and I get distracted or like, it's a book that had to return to the library and I just never got a chance to get back to it. It's not like a deliberate, I can't finish this book. But I had to struggle reading The Wasp Factory because there was so much graphic animal abuse that I just essentially got to like skimming because I couldn't actually sit and read the whole book because it was just too much for me. But I have to finish all books because I have to know what happens. And then it took me multiple times. At some point I'll probably do like a video about the House of Leaves because it took me multiple tries to get to that book. And that book was like an accomplishment to read that. So nothing like I have, but there's no book that I'm like, I keep trying and I can't do. Like, eventually I will try again. So that's just my thing. Like, I can't leave a book unfinished. It's just, I don't know. It's me. 36. What are some of your favorite quotes or scenes from a book? I mean, there's so many. I think still one of my favorite quotes of all time is from Gatsby when it talks about, we beat on boats against the current, borne ceaselessly back into the past, or I probably messed it up, but I think that's just really beautiful. A lot of the classics have some really beautiful stuff, but there's so many. I mean, I don't know. Like, I think that's so much to ask. 37. Did you read in school? And can you remember what you read? I mean, I read anything. I have always been a reader. I was one of those people who generally read the book it was assigned in that first day. So you know how they like give you the novel and then they'd be like, okay, we're going to take like a month to read this. And you'd have to read 12 pages in a night or 30 pages in a night. And I would have it usually read in that first night, maybe the second night. And then I'd move on to other things. And then it would actually be kind of frustrating because I'd start talking about things and my teacher would be like, please don't talk about that. We haven't gotten there yet. Or I'd forget what had happened because, it had been like 3 weeks since, and I was reading other things. So yeah, I mean, I love to read. And so I read in school. I read the books for school. Yeah, definitely, enjoy reading. I went to school to be an English major, so obviously reading for school was a thing I did. 38. Are there any books you could read over and over and never get bored of? I have read, I've read Catcher in the Rye over 100 times, so obviously I don't get bored with that. I'm trying to think of other things I've read multiple times. A lot of the classics, just because I'd read them for one class and then I'd have to read them again. And so like Gatsby, I've read several times. I've read Frankenstein. Frankenstein, actually, the more I read it, the more I like it, just because there's so much to talk about with that book. And then I've read the Harry Potter series multiple times because I would always, before the next book would come out, I would go back and reread the last few books, or before the movie would come out, I'd go back and read the series. So I definitely have read those multiple times, and I enjoyed them more, the more I would read them too. So, although... Well, I'm not gonna ruin it for anybody else, but at some point somebody had mentioned to me a certain quirk about Rowling's writing, and then it really got to me because I would notice it every single time. So I'm not gonna say it because I don't want to get anybody else hung up on it. 39. What was the last book you read? I finished Foe by Ian Reid, and then I'm currently reading The Island, which I think is Adrian McGinty, which I'm about 70% through, so I'll probably be finished with that pretty soon, probably before I, post this. 40, what's the last book you bought? All right, so did you buy it online or in a store, ebook or paperback? I just bought some old Christopher Pike books online, and then I don't know when the last time I've been in a store was. And then I've also bought a bunch of ebooks lately. And I can't remember what the last ones I bought were. Just some mysteries. I have a huge Amazon book wish list. And so I just bought there was a deal, essentially on buy so many Kindle books and get a discount. And so I did, and I don't even remember which ones I grabbed. I was just like, let's grab all of these. Just take a bunch of stuff off my list. 41. Do you like to display your books on a bookshelf or keep them in a virtual library? Obviously, again, I have moved a lot. I mean, my dream is obviously to have, the library from Beauty and the Beast. We all want that, right? But at the same time, I rent. So, I mean, there's only so much I can do. I like to keep... some of my nicer books, some of my favorites, I do keep those and I put them in the bookshelves. But then other things, it's easier to just keep virtually. But yeah, I mean, in a dream world, if I was, had all the money in the world, I would build a massive library and it would just be overflowing with books. And there would be floor to ceiling books, and everybody would come in and we'd have the ballroom and we'd dance around the library, which I think is actually a different room. But in my mind, that big scene where they're dancing in Beauty and the Beast is actually also in the library, but I don't know if it is. I kind of now I need to go back and check. But in my fantasy world, people just like dance around in libraries. So 42, do you prefer flash fiction, short stories, novellas, or novels? I mean, generally novels. Novellas are fine. I tend to not like a lot of short stories. I mean, they're fine. It's just that by the time you get into it, it's like done. So, and I think there's only a few writers who are just really, really effective at it. I mean, Stephen King has some great short stories. He also has some that I just don't like, but he has a lot of great ones. Ray Bradbury is a great short story writer. Neil Gaiman has some pretty good short stories. But, and I'll be honest, I know there's like, the best American short stories and they do it every year. And, maybe that's part of it too, is I'm just not exposed to them. But, I just I really like novels and, I like depth. It's, and to me, it's like why I don't, I get behind on my comic books because I don't like to necessarily read one issue and then wait a month. So I like wait until I have a stack so I can kind of read an arc or a series of the story. I mean, I should probably just buy the trade paperbacks, but I like the comics because they're more valuable. And also I like the individual covers. But I don't like to read them in like those quick spurts. It's just, I feel like by the time I get excited about what's going on and remember what's going on, it's time to be done. 43, what book can I recommend? Well, that's so hard because I have no idea like what other people like. I would say if you haven't read it, read I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. It's just so phenomenal. It's the best book I've read in a long time. And other than that, I think The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. I really love that one as well. Both kind of dark, so, obviously you have to be into, like, the dark things. They're fairly short. I'm Thinking of Ending Things is very short. I'm Thinking of Ending Things is, like, kind of horror, psychological horror, but not. So if you go into it thinking it's going to be, like, horror, like, in the traditional sense, you may be disappointed. Think of it more like of a, I don't know, whatever your film experiences, but it's more like an It Comes at Night or The Babadook or It Follows kind of horror, where there's like horror elements and it's unsettling, but it's not like traditional horror in that way. And then The Last House on Needless Street is kind of like a thriller, mystery, psychological kind of book as well. So those are like what I think are the best books I've read in the last few years. 44, when did you last visit a library physically? It's been a long time, probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. Although I actually have to go renew my digital library card by the end of the summer, so I'll be going pretty soon. But I use that Libby app so that I can I pretty much read from the library all the time. So 45, if you ever had a crush on a book character, yeah, growing up, like, Holden Caulfield was the love of my life, and, he's not real. So, I think he's still the love of my life. I mean, now he's not because he's, like, 16 years old, but the concept of him, like, if there was an adult version, I guess. But, yeah, growing up, like, I was, like, in love with him, and, like, my friends kind of, like, tease me about it. They're like, you're not going to meet Holden Caulfield, so you need to, like, get your life in order. 46, has a book ever made you laugh out loud? Definitely. I mean, Good Omens by Terry Pratchett, Neil Gaiman. The Thursday Murder Club made me laugh out loud. I know there's other ones that I've definitely found really funny. I read, I haven't finished it. I had started it, and then I had to return it to the library because people were waiting. And so then I went and bought it, but I haven't gotten back to it at this point. I think Anxious People by Frederick Bachman, I believe. And the beginning of that was really funny, too. So 47, has a book ever made you cry? Absolutely. I mean, I cry all the time. Like, so I don't know. Like, I'm not the best for that. I mean, if an animal dies, like, I can't read something like Marley and Me. Like, there's no way. Like, no, it's just not, that's not going to happen. But yeah, I've definitely cried. I don't think I have in like a while, but that's because I mostly read thrillers, so they're not really sad. But yeah, like, I mean, I've definitely cried. 48. Are you generally good at guessing twists or being able to see what's coming? And have any stories genuinely shocked you? Yes, I am very good at guessing. And sometimes it's probably because I read too much in the genre. But I can often figure out what's going to happen. So what's good, when I like an author, it's because I can kind of sense where it's going without it totally spelling it out for me. The biggest shock would be, and then there were none. I think that's just renowned for being such a shocking and surprising ending. But also, what's another thing I liked about I'm Thinking of Ending Things is it definitely took me in a direction I didn't expect it to go. 49. What's your favorite drink, snack, or beverage to have while reading? I don't know. Like, I would say coffee, if not water. It's nice to have a beverage near you when you're reading, but, I mean, obviously I like to snack, but I'm also, like, afraid I'm going to get, like, whatever all over the book, so, or on my Kindle or my phone, so, that being said, I probably snack all the time, but, like, I don't feel like I need a snack when I'm reading. I do like to have a beverage nearby, though. And 50, what book will you read next? Well, after I finish The Island, I'm not sure. I have a bunch of stuff on my TBR. I have some stuff I borrowed from the library. I have a ton of books that, I have in my house that I need to get to. So I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to start with next. I'm thinking I might read, I'm trying to think what I have from the library. I might read Hyde, I think by Kirsten White, because I had started it and then returned it and then got it back. So that might be one. I'm probably just going to have to see what's, honestly, when I'm done, what has people waiting, because I like to try to, like, prioritize the ones that have a wait list so that I can get them done before they're due back, so I don't run into this issue where I, like, have to return it and then I have to wait again. So, because that's happened for a few times. All right, so that was it. Hope that was kind of interesting. Probably wasn't. But I will be back with some book recommendations and other things soon. Bye.